many months today. I posted it in the back channel. It was someone that contacted me who is really into this with going into scams from the victim's perspective and asked me if I would like to help him transfer gold to Turkey. Let's rethink that, sir.
And then you had one of your kind of predictions or warnings.
Yeah, I predicted yesterday, or rather, I had rumors or sources, or whatever we would like to call it, that ICANN is looking over how to retract the IPv4 and IPv4 addresses, as well, apparently, as the root service for the internet from Russia. And I didn't know at that time that that actually was a request from Ukraine that they had made forward to ICANN. But ICANN is actually pondering about the thing. So we might have a whole large country without very without internet, and very, very hard to actually get back on it until somebody lets them in again, Uganda.
I heard something else from a network engineer today that they were also considering revoking SSL certificates, which would make.
They have already done that for them.
Has that already happened?
Yeah, they did retract some of the major Russian banks' chain certificates in the process. So, if you have updates in your browser during the night now, you did or rather last night, you did get an updated blacklist, and some of the Russian major banks' certificates are the whole key chain from that bank is withdrawn. So their whole key infrastructure probably collapsed, but we don't know that. But we know that they retracted them. Sorry.
Hmm. Yeah, because things are going to get a little tricky. Little how to exist economically in that kind of an environment. Okay, can somebody on the Twitter space stage unmic? And let's see who unmics first, and then have a quick.
There you go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
There you go. Thank you, Frank. You got it right the first time today. That's great. So let's jump right into it then. Anybody else with the so kudos to Johan for sharing something prematurely that is now seems to be coming to fruition, which is the loss of the IPv4 IP addresses in Russia. And for the non-sysadmins in the room, which is pretty much everybody, that means they're not going to have an internet. That means the phone numbers that go to the websites will no longer be working. So it's going to, unless you have other interesting ways to connect to websites, you're not going to be able to use the traditional means of using your browser to access websites. So that's going to be a little difficult. Anywho, anybody else with?
But Tyler, isn't that what dictators want?
I don't know. Well, it seems Putin is very interested in having their narratives spread internationally, but that has also been curtailed remarkably in the past 48 hours, where RT and Sputnik and the other Russian media is basically now gagged and silenced outside of Russia, including on all social media accounts, app stores, what have you. And I didn't realize, I mean, RT tries to operate with a posture that they aren't really, influenced, and they aren't really, that they're independent in their voice and whatever. But the Kremlin is certainly very upset when RT isn't able to do what it does. So that kind of there's a little cognitive dissonance there. Anyhow, fair question.
Was it? What is a decision? Did it actually happen, or was it proposed?
The ICANN, Johan, what's the status?
I don't think it's implemented.
Yeah, I don't think it is either. Johan?
Sorry, I left the phone. They are pondering about it. The thing is here that this will have very, very large implication if they remove them from the map. And the thing is that the way back, since this is actually hard coded into some of the routers, and for us that are going to remain on the outside of the blockade, we will get an instant update. But our Russian friends, they will probably need to go to every router in the whole network and remove that the other BGP major routers from the BGP map list and rebuild it from the beginning. And we anticipate, as an adequate guess, that it will take them more than a year before they are back, so they actually have a working internet inside of Russia.
So I pinned the link to the top of the room. It's from Ars Technica. It says, sent days after Russia's invasion, the letter said that Russia's atrocious crimes have been made possible mainly due to Russian propaganda machinery using websites continuously spreading disinformation, hate speech, promoting violence, and hiding the truth regarding the war in Ukraine. Ukrainian IT infrastructure has undergone numerous attacks from Russian side, impeding citizens and government's ability to communicate. The letter asked ICANN, which is based in California, to, quote, revoke permanently or temporarily the domains .ru, which is every website in Russia, by the way, and .su, which is all the ones that aren't .ru. So basically, can you please, shut down every website in Russia? This list is not exhaustive and may also include other domains issued in the Russian Federation. Next, the letter asked ICANN to contribute to the revoking for Ssl certificates for the above-mentioned domains and to shut down the DNS root servers in St. Petersburg and Moscow. ICANN has previously explained that root servers respond to DNS lookup requests made by DNS resolvers, generally operated by Internet Service Providers, or ISPs, and it was sent by Ukraine's Vice Prime Minister and Minister of Digital Transformation to ICANN CEO Goran Marby. Quote, apart from these measures, I will be sending a separate request to RIPE NCC asking to withdraw the right to use all IP4 and IP6 addresses by all Russian members. They're not playing around now.
ICANN has refused. They have declined that 6 hours ago, and they replied in a letter to this Deputy Prime Minister of Digital Transformation. Agreed policies do not provide for ICANN to take unilateral action to disconnect these domains as you request. You can understand why such a system cannot operate based on requests from one territory or country concerning internal operations within another territory or country. Such a change in the process would have devastating and permanent effects on the trust and utility of this global system. And I will pin the link here on Twitter in a minute.
Okay, thank you. So the next topic for today, I found a really interesting Twitter thread that I can share with you now. If I can find it, I'm sure I can. Here we go. There it is, right up there. Let me just open it. And this is from somebody with a strong reputation in the aerospace or aviation space. And his name's Jan Nedvidek. And he says, I work in the aviation sector, and I can tell you that for all intents and purposes, Russian aviation has, at best, 3 weeks before it's over. One aspect is the fact that airspace available to Russian aircraft is now very, very limited. However, there is more. Very few aircraft are actually owned by airlines, and instead most are owned by leaser companies, most of which are Irish. Under the sanctions, the view in the legal community is that those leases have to be terminated. Otherwise, Irish companies will be criminally liable. So basically, Russian airlines will no longer have their planes. Number two, more importantly, Russian operators, meaning the airlines, are unable to effect insurances. So if you're not able to have the proper insurances, you're not able to fly. Without those insurances, no national aviation authority will allow access to its airspace. This would in effect mean the end of Russian operators flying internationally. Furthermore, despite the presence of some of small airplane manufacturers domestically in Russia. The bulk of aircraft operated in Russia is still Boeing and Airbus. Those use CFM, GE, and Rolls-Royce engines. All of these manufacturers have cut off access to repair manuals, without which the aircraft and engines cannot be serviced. They have also issued a global ban on servicing in other countries so that Russian aircraft cannot be flown abroad for maintenance. They have also stopped the supply of spare parts. From talking to our clients, I understand that most airlines keep about 2 to 3 weeks worth of spare supplies. What does that mean? Russia will be in effect cut off from international travel. Perhaps with the most notable exception of China, it will be more isolated than the USSR, and even domestic journeys will be severely limited. We can probably expect that some international operators will continue to operate some flights, perhaps to Istanbul or Dubai, but we're talking about going from hundreds of cross-border flights to probably 6 or 7. That's a whole lot of less flying.
That's good for the climate.
Yeah, always on the bright side there. Okay, so and just an interesting detail that I've not seen anyone in the news cover, because it requires a bit of personal context, like that gentleman was able to share on that tweet, which is great. So, anyone else with a relevant headline, or we will go into the big, boring top tech news headlines of today.
Tyler, I think this is Robert.
Hey, Robert.
Yeah, you'll probably go through it, but I thought the Uber one, the free rides offered once you cross the Polish border toward a couple of countries, the free rides from Uber would seem to be pretty interesting for refugees, any refugee, and also the them creating the donation button to support the refugees in this Ukrainian-Russian war. And then lastly, the power surge and outage in Taiwan. Didn't know if anybody had any more information on that.
Or restoring slowly, but yes, it's a malfunction in the one of the plants. So it took some of the cities are still without the powers, but most of the cities are restoring the powers
Hey,
right now.
BB, was that bad weather? Was it by chance or was it by little techno friends?
Long story. Actually, because of no nuclear plant policy here, so the government is trying to transfer the industry from so-called green energy in the future. But we all know those factories need a lot of powers, especially those semiconductors or other related industries. Actually, by the experts already predicted we're gonna have outages this summer. So that's it's something, political issues as well. But today, maybe for my personal feelings, I think that's especially now the Russia-Ukraine war here, a little bit like a taste of a war, because suddenly it just got the power, just the outage just came so suddenly. No one prepared for that. So, but fortunately, we still have the internet, so we can check online what happened. So it's sad.
Hey,
Yeah.
BB, can you tell them what just happens to be made in those two cities that where the power outage went out?
Actually, it's more than 2 cities, so like 6 or 7 cities. But mainly, it said there was an explosion in the Kaohsiung Xingda power plant, and it caused
Mm-hmm.
malfunctions. Yeah, so it said it was explosion, so it's an equipment malfunction. Then it caused the spread because the other network, the grid, is like a chain reactions, so it make them together to I don't know the term. It just outage together. So not every city, but because they mainly from the southern Taiwan. So from for example, where I live in Kaohsiung. So half of the city was without electricity at once. And so no traffic lights, no especially no traffic lights, so you can see the cars running around the cities. And there was around maybe 80 car accidents within 6 hours. So it was not that serious, if you're considering those industry or even these manufacturers. They have like UPS, but around days half day the most of the power is restored now. So
Yeah, I was just wondering, for those of us who look at tactics, was it like if it was a cyber, it could be like a rehearsal. But for those of you who don't know, if I recall, TSMC has plants in the areas where the outages were.
no,
No, they're in Hsinchu.
no. Yes, Hsinchu has some places in Hsinchu. Yeah, we're out of power, of course, but TSMC was not influenced by this outage this time. Their new factory in Kaohsiung is just past the plan, so not yet. The newest plant in Kaohsiung just passed actually they just uh, promised to the to the government that they are gonna build new factories in Kaohsiung. So that one is not in functional yet. So it's this time it's okay for TSMC. But yeah, we are still facing very severe problem that this summer might happen this summer. So that's what's you can see right now.
Right. I
Hey,
think.
Tyler, Ken,
Yep.
I have news on that Russian air thing you were just talking about.
Uh-huh.
So there was news this morning that Sabre Holdings, which is this big reservation system, it's a global reservation system that all the airlines use, they cut Aeroflot off. So that you can't get Aeroflot flights through Sabre anymore. So that's a big deal.
Yep.
I would say
Yeah.
also, by the way, on the leasing situation, I think all the other things you mentioned are probably correct, but I think the leasing companies are going to be very careful about using any leverage there, because remember, the leasing companies themselves borrow money in the bond markets and they have to pay their bondholders. So if they don't get lease payments from Aeroflot, they can't pay their bondholders. So it's a problem for them too. It's a big problem. So it's a very difficult situation that they're in. So anyway, I'll just leave it there.
But for those who don't know, Aeroflot is the major airline in Russia. um, and by the way, back to the PowerPoint, no pun intended, the America's kind of premier weekly news show called 60 Minutes this past weekend did on February 28th. So yeah, on what is that? Yeah, Sunday, the last episode that they did, because they're every Sunday. And the feature story was all about how secure is America's power grid. And they interviewed absolute experts. And in fact, they interviewed the people who are in charge of running it, both locally at the local, state, and national level. And I'm pinning that to the top of the room. How secure is America's electric grid? Right there, the YouTube video. It's 13 minutes long, and it's the best commercial for getting yourself a solar system ever made. It will scare the living shit out of you, is what it will do. If you don't end up buying yourself your own solar system with batteries after watching that video, you never will. That is the best commercial that could ever be made for getting people to buy their own solar and battery systems to get off the grid. The grid is completely...
Tyler, you're such an ad. You're such an ad.
I'm just saying, watch that video and let me give you my link so that I can refer you directly to what I think is the best battery systems and to buy. Because, by the way, you can go to IKEA now and buy a $5,000 home solar kit, soup to nuts, with the panels and the batteries and everything. So watch that video and tell me that your first thought isn't, I need to get myself my own energy system, because these are legit experts at the government level exposing just how incredibly vulnerable it is. And indeed, the question that seems hypothetical, or the point that seems hyperbolic that the people who were managing COVID in the U.S. are on par with the people who are managing the power grid. I now realize that's not even a fair comparison. I think the people who are managing COVID are far more capable than the people who are managing the grid. And if you thought the people who are managing COVID in your country were inept, wait till you meet the people who are managing your power grid.
Tyler, this is Robert. You're spot on. And one way to look at that too is those of you who remember the Texas outage. Take a look at their board of directors that they had for the utility. A good portion of them, A, weren't even from the area. B, a number of them didn't really have that great of experience. And C, they were also a part of making sure Texas, in essence, isolated itself so that even if it had power issues, it couldn't borrow from other states. So it's not the biggest rocket scientists in the world on these boards making these decisions. And then lastly, Tyler, you have a good point about getting backup equipment. But in America, anytime we hear these things, guess one of the first things we always rush to buy? Guns and ammo.
I was about to say, you know what's funny? It's funny how many people own guns for the idea of securing themselves, when in reality, if you had to choose between having a gun and having your own energy, or your own food supply or your own water supply, I would go with water, food, and energy before the guns, like in that order.
I just wish that, we had this discussion a few months ago, when we were talking about this. I just wish that there was a way for people who live inside buildings, in larger complexes and buildings, to be able to create, to be able to have their own energy source. Because unless you're living in a house or a home or a villa or something, which a lot of people don't. For instance, I right now myself, I'm in a building. I would love to have that, but I can't. So I wish they come up with something that people individually can start using for themselves, and in those situations.
Yeah, I mean, hey, by the way, I lived through that deal in Houston, Texas, with the power outage. Never seen anything like that. I mean, the whole city and the areas out, the contiguous counties were pretty much out. Like hotels were out. Usually, I mean, the posh areas like the Galleria area, everything was completely out. And then the other thing they did was they set crazy bills to a lot of people. I mean, just insane bills, um, and that hurt a whole lot of people. And it doesn't look like it got really any much better. Same thing with the flood we had in the back before. So it's Tyler's right. Get
Yeah,
yourself some backup
watch
and
the
some
video.
water. But yeah, I
Watch
will. I
the video,
will.
because they
But
go
but
into
here,
the
yeah.
details of deep analysis of precisely how vulnerable the grid is, and they've come after some analysis to realize that there's, of the 3,300 substations, if 9 of them are taken out concurrently, it would cause a cascading domino effect that would wipe out the entire national grid simultaneously.
And in the big cities, I remember in New York when it happened. I was living in New York City when we lost power outage in Midtown Manhattan, and it was an eye opener. It was scary. It was after then everybody started calling each other and coming up with plan B and C if we get disconnected from each other, where to meet family members and friends and so forth. But, it was a few hours, and I'll never forget. I mean, it took, people were walking for hours just to get to their homes. People were stuck. They were sleeping all over. I mean, it was just a glimpse of it. I lived through it, just a glimpse of it. Still, just now, the more I know, the more scary it has become, looking back now, that if that was just a tiny glimpse, imagine if it happens on a bigger scale. I mean, it's scary. It's really scary.
And then
Now,
we
when
got
are we
like
going to do a
negative.
show
We
on
got 80.
just
There's about eight,
breaking down all of them
80.
for basic necessities when the power that's provided by our governments just absolutely ends?
Yeah. Someday we'll do one someday. Maher, you were saying?
Yeah, and then I mean the other issue is about 80. I believe it's about 80%. If anybody wants to correct it, but I've read before that 80% of our gas and oil is processed like around the Port of Houston area, in Pasadena, right? So if if there's like the whole cyber war thing that's going on, or if things escalate, and my plan is to get the hell out of Houston, because that's a very, very place that'll be targeted. And if we lose our capabilities to process oil and gas around the country for that high of a percentage, right? That'll cripple us, straight cripple us. And I don't know.
Mayor, you weren't supposed to say that on over broadcast.
You know what's funny though, Jason? That was the thought that just was ringing in my head the whole time I'm watching this 60 Minutes piece. The whole time I'm thinking, holy sweet Jesus, I cannot believe you guys are revealing this publicly on America's biggest freaking weekly show. Like this is like the most embarrassing. You're exposing your Achilles heel to the world writ large, and maybe that's the idea. It's like that's the only thing that it would take to fix it, is we have to publicly expose it. But it's almost like giving out your goddamn password to your freaking bank account online.
Yeah, don't. Yeah, he meant Houston, Tennessee. Is what he was saying.
Sure, he did.
Houston, Tennessee.
Right. So let's go.
That's right. That's right.
Let's go into the regular top news, because as usual for the past few days in a row, the first 5 or so are also about Ukraine. So here we go. The top story today, Thursday, March 2nd, 2022, is that Ukraine's Fedorov, who is that? Is he sounds like a minister, abruptly cancels the planned crypto...
Vice Prime Minister, the digital minister.
Okay, thank you. So Ukraine's deputy prime minister and minister of, technology or digitization or whatever, abruptly cancels the planned crypto airdrop, saying that Ukraine will sell NFTs to raise funds. There it is. Pinned to the top of the clubhouse room. Ukraine's going to drop some NFTs, everybody. Now we've reached peak 2022. And God knows that let's just hope they raise half of what the goddamn crypto punks did. Jesus Christ, they could raise an incredible amount of money. He says, after careful consideration, we decided to cancel airdrop. Every day there are more and more people willing to help Ukraine to fight back the aggression. Instead, we will announce NFTs to support Ukrainian armed forces soon. We do not have any plans to issue any fungible tokens. So instead of tokens, they're going to do NFTs. They should do virtual real estate or something, or real estate. Why not? They've got a lot of land over there. They could sell a whole lot of land through a sort of tokenized... They could sell citizenship or virtual citizenship, which Estonia has been known to do. Digital citizenship. They could do all kinds of crazy things that people would support. Anyway, the next one is that Ukraine has received over $50 million in crypto donations across about 90,000 assets since February 26th. Blockchain data shows $10 million in Bitcoin, $16 million in Ethereum donations. The Ukrainian crypto crowdfunding effort has now exceeded $50 million through almost 90,000 separate donations. Next, SAP, one of the world's largest digital companies, will be stopping business in Russia aligned with sanctions and pausing sales of products and services in Russia following a Ukrainian vice prime minister's request. Same guy. Mikhailo Fedorov, it's now clear, is the person who's calling every big company on the planet requesting that they stop doing business with Russia. This guy's been very busy. And his team must have come upon a very nice email list of powerful company CEOs, and has one hell of a mail merge program, because he's contacting everybody and people are responding every day. There's other massive Fortune 500.
He's also the one who asked Elon Musk for Starlink and got his wish come true.
Exactly right. So
yeah, two of the largest Swedish companies, Spotify and IKEA, both of them are withdrawing from Russia, closing down all operations there for now.
IKEA and who?
Spotify. I don't know if you've heard of
Spotify.
them.
I've heard of Spotify. Yeah, I thought it was Spotify. Sorry. The next one is
That's a new brand, Spotify.
Spotify. The next one is that the Ukrainian Vice PM, Fedorov, this guy's in all of the top stories today. It's incredible. Calls on Sony, Ubisoft, Microsoft, and other gaming companies, because Sony has Xbox. Sony has PlayStation. Microsoft has Xbox. Ubisoft is one of the biggest in this space. And he's now calling on all of them to ban Russian and Belarusian accounts from playing video games. And dear sweet God, if you thought taking away Visa and MasterCard was going to be painful, wait until the video games stop over there in Russia. Are we taking it too far now? Because that's almost like, isn't that like a human right to be able to play video games?
Well, Tyler, actually, during some groups in Afghanistan were actually using video games to communicate. During the Iraq War, when we were in Afghanistan, when we were in Iraq, that's how a lot of people were communicating.
He said, the vice prime minister says the move will motivate the citizens of Russia to rise up and protest. Well, because they're sitting at home playing video games all day. That's why they're not protesting. So if we shut off the video games, I like how this guy's thinking. We got to get all of those video game playing kids out of their closets.
Hey, Tyler. This is Vinay. If you think about it, if you compare everything that's happening to Russia with what China has done, their closed internet, shutting off video games already, stopping computer games, it looks like they're getting ready for sanction proofing themselves.
Right. Go ahead. China's already sanctioned themselves, right? Yeah.
I have a question about that, right? Which is with Russia basically, shutting down so many different companies, American companies, from leaving, right? In a way, confiscating our, many of our assets. Right? I mean, they got lobbyists and stuff. I mean, how is that going to play out? I mean, that's what do you guys think of? Like, how does that play out for national security?
I'm sorry, I missed that. Can you say it again, Maher?
With Russia basically not allowing so many American companies and large ones from, they're blocking, Putin's blocking a lot of them from leaving Russia, right? So I mean, it's a confiscation of our assets over here, and these big companies have a bunch of lobbyists, right? So what are they gonna do? Because they're not just gonna let go of all the billions of dollars or whatever they got in there, right? It's I mean, that's almost an attack on us,
Yeah, but you know what? They're probably thinking of the bigger picture too. And don't forget, we got a couple of $1 trillion floating around here, so they probably got their eyeballs on some big government contracts too. I'm joking, but half serious. Um, but I think they're looking at a bigger picture. I get the patriotism and everything like that and pushback, but these people are also looking at bigger cash in opportunities too.
Okay, so I just found a tweet from Mr. Fedorov. I just retweeted him on our Twitter account, TNATW. It's the most recent tweet, and it says Xbox and PlayStation. That's who he's addressing in this tweet. He tags them in the tweet. He says, you are definitely aware of what is happening in Ukraine right now. Russia declare war, not for Ukraine, but for all civilized world. If you support human values, you should leave the Russian market. But he spelled it L-I-V-E. You should live the Russian market. He meant leave the Russian market. And he's got more than 1,000 retweets on that. And then it's a hand typed letter with a stamped and physical ink signature. He says, to all game development companies and esports platforms, the Russian Federation has carried out deceptive and outrageous military attack on my country. Just imagine, in 2022, cruise missiles attack residential neighborhoods, kindergartens, and hospitals in the heart of Europe. The armed forces and citizens are defending Ukraine to no end. The whole world is repelling the aggressor through the imposition of sanctions. The enemy must suffer significant losses, but we need your support. In 2022, modern technology is perhaps the best answer to the tanks, multiple rocket launchers, and missiles. I am sure that you will not only hear, but also do everything possible to protect Ukraine, Europe, and finally the entire democratic world from bloody authoritarian aggression. And I appeal to temporarily block all Russian and Belarusian accounts, temporarily stop the participation of Russian and Belarusian teams and gamers in all international esports events, and cancel all international events holding on the territory or being held in the territories of Russia and Belarus. We are sure that such actions will motivate the citizens of Russia to proactively stop the disgraceful military aggression. Very interesting.
It doesn't even have to be all of them. It's overwhelmingly two games, Dota 2 and Counter-Strike, that are played in Russia competitively and personally. So even just those two would make a big effect on that generation.
I heard, by the way, I saw on a street corner today, somebody had printed up signs that says every Russian is responsible, #stop Putin. That's the whole sign. And of course, that's a debatable point. And some people do feel that way. Some people obviously don't, that individual Russians aren't responsible. And I heard a surprisingly good argument in this. This was shared on Facebook, and people were debating this. And one person made the point that there's 144 million Russians, and the person said, don't tell me that 144 million of you can't do anything about this, or something to that effect. That, yeah, individually, yeah, true, nobody's directly individually responsible, but collectively, that you can't say that you can't do anything. That's an interesting point. So,
Why is it even a choice for Xbox and even Sony when both the United States and Japan are supporting the sanctions? Aren't they going to be required by the U.S. and Japanese governments to cut them off?
right.
I mean, why is it even an option?
Probably so, and that's why I said it's not that you're only baby steps away when you have Sony, PlayStation, Microsoft, Xbox shutting off in Russia. You're only a few baby steps away from Google Android, Microsoft Windows, and Google and Apple iPhones from being shut off. And if you think shutting off the video games will get people out of their sofas, chairs to start protesting in the streets, wait till you shut off all of their smartphones, all of them, all of them.
But Tyler, we're 7 days into this war. Why hasn't that happened already?
Because I think that's the nuclear no going back from there. That's like,
there's a difference between this, isn't there? That one is the denial of future services, as in we will no longer sell future devices. We will no longer allow future services. What we're talking about here for the gaming isn't kicking people off games. It's shutting down the continued and future access to a service, which is the multiplayer. It's not actually locking people out of something which they've bought. Now, what you're talking about here is taking something that a person has paid for that belongs to them, and then removing their continued usage of that. So I agree with you, Tyler. That is a next level of escalation on behalf of the corporations.
Yeah. Plus, there's the potential that people will perceive this as an attack from the U.S., for example.
Exactly, doing more damage than harm.
Right. So,
I think, Tyler, you call this. I mean, this is
if China engages if they start engaging in these same types of acts, do we stop getting our iPhones?
Say the question again, please.
If China starts engaging in these types of acts in the very near future, do we stop? Are we going to lose access to our iPhones and that technology?
They would just have to move the manufacturing out of China, and the iPhones would get more expensive. That's all.
Foxconn.
I mean, they only manufacture them.
Like a year ago,
manufacturing them anywhere.
Yep, they're already moving to Vietnam, right?
Yeah, like Foxconn already moving to Vietnam and other southern east country.
Apple's been talking about trying to make more and more Apple products in the U.S. For a few years now. I can guarantee, I will bet, I can almost guarantee, and I will bet that Apple by the way, big announcement, big headline, maybe the biggest for some people. The next Apple event date has now been announced, March 8th, 5 days away. Big, massive global iPhone event, or I'm sorry, Apple event. I'm willing to bet in that event, Tim Cook or somebody else, but almost certainly Tim Cook, will make some reference to manufacturing Apple products in the United States. Or not in China.
I thought top story was that they would give you a new computer.
More diversification of manufacturing, like moving manufacturing into, as you just heard, India and what was the other one, BB? Vietnam.
Vietnam and India and Vietnam.
Yeah. So, and or US, as they've mentioned in previous events. But now that concept, when they mentioned that concept 3 years ago, people kind of shrugged their shoulders like, really? Do I really want to pay more for an American-made Apple whatever? Maybe. Now in 2022, hell yeah, get them things out of China. Because this whole supply chain thing is becoming, weaponized, and it's very possible that China's going to make some weird maneuver like that. Although I would be surprised, because they want to make those phones there, and they want to continue making those phones there, and they lose more than Apple does by refusing to make them, because Apple could replace them, and then the rest of the world will stop making their products there. I don't think they're that. I think they've done the math, and they wouldn't be willing to shoot themselves in the face like that.
Yeah,
I'm
I
sure
think the
he's
fear. I
thinking in
think
their
the
minds,
fear of
which is what
China
we're
is a
using
little
anyway.
early
What
right
we're saying
now.
anyway is that the overwhelming majority of the cost of an Apple device is not the manufacturing or the parts. It's the payment for all the branding, the advertising, and the stores, all the extra stuff that's added on top. Quite often these phones, when they're pulled apart and the components actually priced individually, they come to something like, $120, something like that, far, far below the RRP.
Okay. Oracle says it has already suspended all operations in Russia following Ukrainian Minister Fedorov's request of Oracle to do so. There you go again. This dude single-handedly is getting the world to back out of Russia, at least the tech part of the world. Incredible. Unprecedented. It's kind of amazing to witness.
And he's the youngest minister in the cabinet and very relevant.
The next article's from Bloomberg. It says a group of 35 former employees at a crypto startup incubator called Consensus are alleging that, quote unquote, serious irregularities in a Swiss court order, in a Swiss court over an asset transfer and demand an audit. A group of former employees at Consensus is alleging serious irregularities at the startup incubator. Okay, I'm sure we'll hear more about that to come. Bloomberg says they have sources that the SEC is probing the NFT market to determine if tokens are securities, focusing on fractional NFTs, in which a token is broken into units for sale. Yeah, and by the way, the new chatter around town, and tell me if I'm wrong, because this is an important issue, and I think Ben and Amay would be really interesting to hear from on this, and anyone else who has a thought, is this whole concept that if Russia is going to, Russians and Russia is going to embrace cryptos more generally as a result of their own currency difficulties and trade difficulties, being out of SWIFT and Visa and MasterCard and what have you, it seems absolutely like a natural proclivity that they're going to pursue kind of DeFi solutions, does it not? And that's going to lead to the same sort of global crackdown that we're seeing. That's likely to be hyper-extended into cracking down on those cryptos that are being embraced by Russia as a circumvent.
Warren called for that yesterday, by the way.
Say again?
Senator Warren from Massachusetts is already saying they need to do something so that Russia can't use crypto as a backdoor to get around sanctions. Yeah.
Right. This is my point precisely, which is you're going to see the U.S. politicians and then by extension, international politicians getting together and creating a sort of environment where we need to crack down on all of this crypto stuff, because now it was previously being used by nameless, faceless individuals for nameless, faceless transactions, but now it's being used by Putin to fund a war, and we got to shut this shit show down now. And that's very bad news for Bitcoin holders, potentially, and crypto holders of all kinds. Carl, you have your hand up in Twitter space.
I actually had a different random thought and question, non-related to this, but I don't want to redirect the direction of the conversation.
But by the way, it's totally possible, as is happened before in the history of politics, that the politicians actually never really liked crypto and Bitcoin, and were always waiting for an ideal boogeyman to attach it to so they can attack it. And now
they've made that apparent, haven't they? That's been very apparent for quite a while.
I think this is the case. I think they can't come out and say, we hate this and we want to shut it down because we hate you having new options. But Putin becoming the poster child for this thing, it's similar to how they have now figured out how they want to put an end. Their main argument for ending end-to-end encryption is that it enables sexual predators and pedophiles, and thus that's why we need to shut it down. Oh, and you're a fan of end-to-end encryption? Are you a pedophile? So this is, again, the political boogeyman tactic. I don't know what the technical term is for that kind of political maneuver.
Just something you said there. I think you just, I think you understand the difference here anyway. We've talked about it, but it's not going to be a case of we don't like it, we'll shut it down. It's going to be more insidious than that, right? It's going to be regulation and controlling on-ramps and off-ramps and tracking and IRS reports and all of that stuff, like really just constricting it to the point of removing most of the core concept of decentralization, because that eventually is much more useful than the concept of shutting the whole thing down, no?
Yep. I've invited Ben and George on stage.
The next is from the New York Times. It says, a look at something called Friends with Benefits, an Andreessen Horowitz-backed DAO with a buzz-fueled social club which attracts artists and investors, but faces problems with its elitism. Friends with Benefits is a VIP lounge for crypto's creative class. And then it, as usual, goes into a very narrative style. It says, on a recent afternoon, 9 members of the crypto social club Friends with Benefits sat at the historic Bradbury building in downtown Los Angeles, testing out a new beverage. And as members sipped from their glasses, the leader of the group's LA chapter explained that the drink contained adaptogens, herbs said to increase focus and stimulate creativity. It makes
what a name.
Anyway. Friends with Benefits is not, it says, Friends with Benefits is what's known as a DAO, a kind of digital co-op that uses cryptocurrency tokens to coordinate access, make payments, and vote on group decisions. And Friends with Benefits is not the biggest DAO, but it has one of the buzziest. It has nearly 6,000 unique token holders, including musicians like Erykah Badu and Azalea Banks. Last year, it raised $10 million from investors, such as the venture capital firm Andreessen Horowitz, in a funding round. The group was started in 2020 when a digital entrepreneur got the idea for an online club for his friends in the art and music worlds. With a private chat room, they could use special cryptocurrency tokens to unlock. Quote, I wanted a place for my creative peers who are so skeptical of tech and finance to have a little light at the end of the tunnel. With Friends with Benefits, what you're getting is vibes, he says. This token is starting to reflect some of the values of those vibes. Okay, so it's more like a social club DAO. There you go. Okay, and then the next article is that Twitter will expand its Birdwatch fact-checking feature to a small and randomized set of US users for feedback after testing it since January 2021. And there you go. That's Twitter responding to the headline we read yesterday, criticizing them for not growing that feature. And now they've responded saying, we're going to grow it. There you go. Boom. Well done, Twitter. 24 hours later. That's how you respond to negative press. And flip it on its head. The next is from CNBC. Snowflake reports their Q4 revenues. Who cares? Next, CNBC. Several U.S. state attorney generals launch a probe into TikTok. Oh, really? TikTok? TikTok, come on. Why would several U.S. state attorney generals be concerned about TikTok? I can't imagine why. Focusing on whether the app's design and operations negatively impact young users' physical or mental health. Say what? What is going on?
Finally,
Tyler, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
What will happen to TikTok in the next 2 years in the US?
Depends on whether Trump become a president again.
Yeah, if Trump's back, that thing will disappear overnight. Yeah. It's going to be very interesting to see. And by the way, you have to imagine. I have to imagine. I am imagining. I do imagine. I will continue to imagine that Facebook, all of the attention and heat and smoke that Facebook was acquiring for the past 6 months with Frances Haugen, who was in the State of the Union address herself in the past 48 hours, right? That Facebook knows exactly what we've discussed in this room dozens of times, that in fact the real troublemaker with young kids is TikTok. And they know that, and they have the proof of that, and that they, in their meetings with government officials, say, if you think we're bad, oh boy, have we got some data for you. We understand you want to crack down on this shit. We legitimately really aren't the bad guys you're looking for. Let us show you what's really going on, and you can decide for yourself who the bad folks are. And now, indeed, it seems that the government types are waking up to what's going on over there in TikTok. So it says in this CNBC article, TikTok is under investigation by a bipartisan group of state attorney generals to determine if the popular video platform negatively affects the health of their younger users. The attorney generals are seeking to find out if the app violated state consumer protection laws. The probe is the latest evidence of momentum behind the push for greater protections for children online. Okay. Frances Haugen, the former Facebook employee who leaked internal documents, was a guest at the annual address for the State of the Union. Her testimony before Congress spurred a series of hearings with tech executives on the subject of better protecting kids. And the attorney generals will look into potential harms to young people using the app and what TikTok knew about those harms, according to a press release from Massachusetts Attorney General Healy's office. That will include looking at techniques TikTok uses to boost engagement, increase the time spent in the app and frequency of usage. Quote, we care deeply about building an experience that helps to protect and support the well-being of our community and appreciate that the state attorney generals are focusing on the safety of younger users. We look forward to providing information on many safety and privacy protections we have for teens. The probe is led by attorney generals from California, Florida, Kentucky, Massachusetts, Nebraska, New Jersey, Tennessee, and Vermont. The same group is also leading an investigation into Facebook parent MENA for allegedly promoting Instagram to young users despite knowledge of its potential harms. Okay.
Hey, Tyler, can I just take you back for a second? I think you, in all due respect, a little bit too dismissive of the importance of Snowflake's financial report.
I thought you might bring that up, but the reality.
No, it's a $1 trillion tech company, and this is tech news. It's $1 trillion tech company that had bad guidance, and the stock's down 17%. I think it's pretty relevant just on that score alone. I just wanted to say that, and also for people who are interested, Lex Friedman's got his latest podcast has Mark Zuckerberg on it as we're talking about Meta.
And for those who aren't aware, Snowflake is cloud computing, essentially, data warehousing. What else can we say? They offer cloud data storage, essentially. So, I mean, that's why it's not that it's not important. It's just relatively not on the front of people's minds, and most people, as big
Well,
as they
yeah,
can get.
it's not maybe a consumer product, but it's if it's $1 billion tech company and the stock's down 17% and you were in tech news, yeah, to me that's just by definition relevant. That's all.
I think it speaks more to the progress that Amazon and Microsoft and Google are making in space. But okay, the next article
So,
is
Tyler,
yes.
this is Jairam. You remember our discussions and all of us in tech news around the world space, how we've been reviewing TikTok's impact on kids and teens in relation to the toxic trends against the teachers, the schools, and also the impact on their psyche. And I'm so pleased that now, these trends are getting investigated by state. And I also wish that this investigation extends to psychological warfare because these trends are not only affecting kids and teens, but adults as well, because the psychological warfare by likes of Putin and others are really heavily used to sway people's mindsets and also to change people's analysis of the reality. So I'm seriously hoping that the psychological warfare aspect is also getting considered later on, and we come up with some policies, to thwart off such attempts.
I have a thought.
Go ahead.
We to your point, because I'm trying to actually translate this headline and multiple that can be forwarded to my children. What have we learned from social media, from Facebook? I mean, there's tons of information about that, plus the pandemic, the effect that it's had on people of a certain demography. Why aren't we marketing that? We know it. We have the detailed impact. I don't think the impacts are fully known yet, but I mean, we should be doing a better job of educating our children. Because when I talk to my kids and say, hey, look, it's owned outside of the U.S., data governance is spotty at best, like I think we could bottoms up, not wait for a top-down response to talk about the impacts, because we've got the history lessons from Facebook and others, the good, the bad, the indifferent. There's a lot of bad, too, if used inappropriately.
Another trend that I noticed recently, since the Russian based accounts were, I don't know, just blocked or slowed down on Twitter, that the right wing media related propaganda has lessened as well. If you notice the trend, I'm just making some analogies and observations because prior to that Russian block, Twitter right wing media related conspiracy theories or extreme views were just tweeting tremendously. Like a lot of the tweets were coming out, and there is a association.
Okay. Next up is Google tells staff in the Bay Area and other U.S. locations to return to physical offices 3 days a week starting April 4th. In a shift to a hybrid work model, Google told employees it expects them to begin returning to physical offices April 4th. Okay, next up is a prominent open source advocate is leaving Microsoft, which he joined in 2016 when it acquired his company. Okay. New York Times says a look at anonymity in crypto as some VCs back founders without learning their names and pseudonymous entrepreneurs control hundreds of millions of dollars. Okay. Next is from Variety out of Los Angeles. Spotify closes its office in Russia indefinitely and removes all content from RT and Sputnik in the EU and other markets, except for in Russia, in concert with everybody else. The EU really did a number there on RT and Sputnik almost overnight. Quite remarkable. And
Yeah,
Spotify,
it's been shut down in
yeah,
UK.
yes, and Spotify got you remember 24 hours ago in our room here, there was a headline kind of pointing fingers at them for not shutting down their Russian office, and now they have. So Amazon plans to.
Tyler, but did you know Fox News was shut down nearly a year ago? So in the UK, because it was not considered giving both sides of the argument, because UK laws require
Wow.
broadcasters to give both sides of the argument.
Okay. The next one is Amazon plans to close 68 brick-and-mortar retail locations across the US and the UK, including all of its Amazon books and pop-up stores. All right. I guess COVID
Yeah,
might.
what they're doing, Tyler, is they're going to concentrate on certain other items. Like they're going to be still keeping up open their food stores and stuff like that. So you have to go like item by item. So apparently they don't want to be in retail books, but they want to be in retail food. So
Okay. Epic Games acquires Bandcamp, which might not be known to most individuals, but nearly every musician knows of it because it's basically a platform that enables musicians to build their online presence. You can kind of think of it as what Facebook does for your aunt and uncle, Bandcamp does for your cousin's band, basically. And Epic Games acquires Bandcamp for nearly what doesn't say the price? No, it doesn't. But Bandcamp has paid nearly $1 billion to artists. And Epic Games, the game company, is buying Bandcamp. That's an interesting move. And Gecko.
A bit of context on that, Tyler. It's very likely they're going to integrate that into the Unreal Engine.
Yep. I agree with that. And then you could go one step further, where if you're a game maker using the Unreal Engine or a metaverse experience maker or even making films in the Unreal Engine, you could pipe in music out of the library from Bandcamp, which is hundreds of thousands, if not millions of titles of artists of all degrees, big and small.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously where they want to end up, where all of these sorts of creation software is going is AI assistance. So actually, we've talked about it a lot, the generation of 3D environments using AI, using, sort of interpreted language. This is just another part of that, isn't it? Add some spooky music, make it faster, et cetera, et cetera. It's quite cool.
Gecko Robotics, which uses its inspection robots to protect infrastructure, raises $73 million. That goes back to our America's power grid security issue right there. And Bloomberg is reporting that Grab now does their Q4 revenue announcement. And then The Verge is doing a Q&A with Sonos CEO on the decision to sue Google for patent infringements, competing with tech giants and more. So if you are interested in hearing from Sonos CEO, who's in a rather heated patent lawsuits, intellectual property lawsuits with Google, which it looks like they're winning, by the way. That could be an interesting interview. Economic Times has one on Bengaluru-based company called Pocket FM, who just raised a whole bunch of money. And what else do we have? A whole bunch of funding announcements. And some more chat logs are leaked today, which reveal the internal structure and hierarchy of the Conti ransomware group, which some experts believe is a rebrand of a previous ransomware group, as I told you they often do, if you follow us regularly. And somebody inside the inner circle is leaking the inner chat logs, which will take that thing down. And then Reuters says they have sources that Amazon plans to file a criminal case against India's Future Group for allegedly transferring its retail assets to Reliance despite a legal prohibition. So that's the continuing drama of that one. That's been going on for quite a while. And Wall Street Journal says they have sources that sports e-commerce startups called Fanatics is raising $1.5 billion at $27 billion valuation. And Berlin-based Tier Mobility, which is the little electric scooters company that's quite popular in Europe, acquires another company called Spin. Facebook to shut down Campus, its college student social network, and Apple announces a digital-only event on March 8th, 10 a.m. Pacific time, which will immediately follow our tech news around the world, and they're calling the event Peak Performance.
hey, Tyler, can I just on Fanatics, which I know something about. Just so people don't know what it is, I'll tell you what it is. It's not a tech company, nothing to do with tech. Basically, they have exclusives with all the professional sports leagues, at least in the United States, to sell like apparel, merchandise, and everything. So their last raise was at $18 billion. Okay. And that was before they bought Topps baseball cards. So they just bought, subsequent between the $18 billion valuation raise and the $27 billion one they just did, they bought Topps baseball's cards, and they actually they squeezed out Michael Eisner. Michael Eisner was running a company, the former chairman of Disney, that was that basically was, I think it was Topps, or it was a SPAC that was going to buy Topps or something, which in Topps has been the exclusive manufacturer, the official manufacturer of baseball cards since I was a kid. Um, and anyway, so they managed to get in there and get it away from Eisner's company. Then they bought the whole company. And there's always been this rumor that they're going to enter sports betting. That's what's propelling this valuation, but I don't really see it. They tried to get a license in New York State for sports betting, which you could even question, why do you want to be there with a 50% tax rate? But they didn't get it, and they're not in any other state. They're not licensed in any state in this country to do sports betting. So they had claimed when they were doing the $18 billion raise that their revenues for 2021 would be like $3.8 billion on that traditional business, which is basically just selling this licensed apparel, merchandise, and stuff. And I just don't understand the valuation, because I haven't seen their income statement. I don't know what the margins are on that revenue, but I can't imagine that's a high margin business, because the leagues like the NFL can go anywhere. They can go to Shopify and say, sell our merchandise, we'll give you a license. So I just wanted to give some background on it, because it's not even a tech company, but it's something that a lot of people pay attention to in other parts of Wall Street. But now you know why, Tyler, by the way, I was so emphatic about Snowflake, because if you have $1 trillion company that loses 17%, that's $170 billion right there. And we're constantly talking about much smaller fund, money raises on this app. So a company losing $170 billion in market cap, that's a tech company, is probably more relevant than some other company raising 50, well, they didn't even, they only raised $1 billion, right? I mean, there's a 27 billion valuation, but sometimes we're talking about $50 million raises. So that was my only point on Snowflake. Okay, I'm done.
So the Apple event that's happening next Tuesday morning, U.S. time, they're calling it Peak Performance, but they're spelling peak, P-E-E-K, which implies that it has something to do with looking, which of course is going to cause people to pontificate and speculate that it has something to do with AR and VR. And indeed, the little promo video that they made is itself an AR video, straight up. Like, no questions about it. That's what it is. So let's see if that's what if they do get into that. They have the others. Yeah.
Sorry, dude. I was just going to say it's very likely to be a dev-heavy event. They need to get developers on side. They need to start early access and start getting games being developed for this, and getting testing kits out to a wider sort of beta group. So it's very likely to be a very developer-heavy event, but quite excited.
Mm-hmm. And they're talking about a rumored update version of the 13-inch MacBook Pro with an M2 chip, which that would be amazing, although I wouldn't count on that. And yeah, we'll see. I suspect they're going to have to mention something about their plans for the metaverse. They don't want to give that race up to Facebook. So the tweets that we need to get into. The first one,
sorry, Tyler, just quickly, I apologize for keeping cutting you off. Have we covered the fact that I can't remember where I saw this week, but the fact that it's been confirmed that they have finished pre-production testing on their units, the head units. Have we discussed that?
Nope.
It was from, I'll try and find the tweet, I'll try and send it to you, but a VR source. And I don't know if JT, I can't see him in Twitter, he's normally in Twitter Spaces. Basically it was confirmed that their pre-mass production testing was finished. So they're ready to start going into actual mass production of their head units. So that again is another sort of coin in the stack that this is going to be a VR focused event that's coming up.
Okay. Nicholas is over in the Twitter space stage. Nicholas, if you have any thoughts on the Apple event next Tuesday, no doubt you've seen the little promo video, which absolutely is teasing a sort of MR experience of some sort. I think you would agree with that assessment. So curious if you have any thoughts as to what might happen next Tuesday. If you do, feel free to unmute. If not, we're going to jump into the tweets. Like this first one from Vinay, which asks, is Uganda's airport at risk of seizure by China? New research shows that Uganda's airport won't be taken as collateral by China upon a loan default, as reported by news organizations. Okay, well, let's hope so. But Sri Lankans probably think otherwise because they had their port taken back, which China funded, and they weren't able to pay the loans on that. And their port now is controlled by China. And China is reportedly using it in militaristic fashion, which is driving people in India, particularly southern India, absolutely crazy. That China is using a port off of their coast in a militaristic fashion. So the next tweet is from Katerina, that robots are increasing mortality among U.S. adults. The automation of U.S. manufacturing, robots replacing people on factory floors, is fueling rising mortality rates among American working age adults. The study, published February 23rd in the journal called Demography, found evidence of a causal link between automation and increasing mortality, meaning death, driven largely by increased quote-unquote deaths of despair, such as suicides and drug overdoses. So this study in the journal Demography found evidence of a causal link between automation and suicides and drug overdoses. And we are just getting started on the automation. And we wonder what's going to happen when automation goes hog wild over the next 5 to 10 years. You're all stunned. Okay, so the next one is from Katerina, that Tesla's sustainable alternative to gas turbines has now been deployed in Alaska. The project is bringing a more sustainable alternative to the gas turbines that power the region during sub-zero temperatures. And now they've got a far more cleaner alternative. And then the next one is that Europeans are panic buying iodine after Putin's nuclear alert. Putin put Russia's nuclear weapons on high alert on Sunday. Officials cautioned that iodine medication would not help in a nuclear war. No, but that's a really interesting headline, and that's if it's based in any bit of truth, it's very interesting. Iodine in practice reduces one's the negativities of being exposed to minor amounts of radiation, but it's not going to stop. I don't know how.
Well,
go ahead, Eric.
Somebody's going to suggest ivermectin for radiation. You never know.
Or maybe like an iodine suppository. That could work too. Interesting headline, that one. The next is also from Katerina, that a new drug candidate reduced brain inflammation and protected against cognitive decline by reducing neuroinflammation. And I'm not even going to try and pronounce this drug, but it's an anti-inflammatory drug candidate. It protected mouse models of Alzheimer's disease against cognitive decline. Fantastic. And then BB shares this one from Reuters, that CNN confirms it's jumping in 5 years late into the streaming subscription race with Netflix and the likes, Disney Plus, and they've come up with the incredibly clever name of CNN Plus, which will come out in the spring at the low price of $2.99 a month for CNN Plus.
My prediction on that, Tyler, it's not going to last very long. But I've heard stories that David Zaslow, who runs Discovery, who's running the new combined, or whatever you want to call it, AT&T Discovery Media Company, because Warner Media, because they merged, is not particularly enamored with CNN Plus. And there's a real question about one of the reasons that the price is as low as it is. It's they probably can't charge anymore because so many people get it, through cable, the regular CNN. How different is it going to be than the other thing? So I would suspect the CNN Plus will be launched and shut down within 365 days. That's my prediction.
Okay, and I have again the Matt Hughes shared the CNBC article that Uber will offer free rides between Ukraine and Poland border and to 2 Polish cities. The service is part of a broader set of initiatives Uber announced Wednesday to support Ukraine in the face of Russian invasion. And the next one is from The Guardian, from Bibi. It says, could Russia shut down the internet in Ukraine? And the analysis says, on a national level, web access has so far been largely unaffected by the invasion. And I imagine there are ways to do it, at least temporarily. And you could even shut down the whole power grid, actually. It might be even a much easier way to do it. And you would not only shut down the internet, but also the energy net, the power grid, which would be far more catastrophic. And then we have the Apple event March 8th. And JT is also covering the Apple March 8th event because JT is very interested in the metaverse and VR. And that's why he's sharing it, because that Apple event, he just found out that the Apple's March 8th peak performance event page features an animated AR logo, adding more credence to the idea that this event is going to highlight Apple's plans into the metaverse. So when you watch this little trailer that they made, you can watch it through AR in your own house. And the Apple logo makes this very trippy, psychedelic tunnel wherever you happen to be watching it. U.S. COVID cases have dropped more than 90%. That's some great news there from the New York Times. Russian-owned Philips auction house says sanctions won't affect business. Okay. And Ukrainian authorities say that citizens don't need to declare captured Russian tanks on their taxes. Authorities said the declaration of seized tanks and military equipment is unnecessary as the cost of this does not exceed 100 living wages. Cybersecurity needs to improve. The next headline is from David Crace. It says, cybersecurity needs to improve if IoT is to thrive. That's a great point. By the end of 2021, there were an estimated 10 billion IT devices around the world. And indeed, we need to improve the security across the whole spectrum if we're really going to go big into more IoT and smart homes and smart cars and smart cities. Otherwise, they're going to all be completely vulnerable. It's one thing when your phone or your laptop's vulnerable. It's a whole other thing when your smart home, your smart city is completely vulnerable for obvious reasons. Again, we could refer back to Ukraine for that one.
Tyler, can I just jump in on that one for a second?
Go ahead.
Just as that's exactly what I'm in the middle of doing. So part of that's the responsibility of the manufacturers, of course. I don't think they're ever going to be incentivized to do what they would need to do to keep that data private. So I just want to remind people that part of it's the responsibility of ourselves. It is possible to stop those things talking to the internet and still they operate perfectly well. So if you're interested in that, then look at things like VLANs, virtual local area networks, and firewall rules and those sort of things. Many of you will already have devices in your house that would allow you to run IoT devices off a separate network, Wi-Fi, off a separate Wi-Fi SSID, off a separate Wi-Fi name, for example. For example, your house IoT. If you do that and fiddle around in your router enough and get really frustrated or consult a geek, then you can arrange that those things can operate but cannot talk to the internet. unless you're beholden to systems like Nest, where they can only operate via the internet. So Mabana will know what I'm talking about there, but it is fundamentally possible for you to take complete control of that yourself now on your own hardware, still use this stuff and prevent it phoning home. So just FYI, we don't have to wait till they do stuff. We can take it into our own hands. It may require buying a little bit of extra equipment you don't currently have, like a more flexible firewall or so forth. But if anybody's interested in that or how to do that, give me a shout. Happy to help.
What is this concept you're talking about called responsibility, Ben?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was talking to grown-ups. No, my bad. I won't contribute anymore.
Yeah, please, Ben.
Yeah, Tyler, I'd like to add to Ben there. Yeah, like I built a network in my house, and I basically put all my cameras, of course, a lot of them are Chinese cameras, manufactured cameras, all on a separate VLAN, which means that they can't talk to outside. If I have to update them for any reason, update software, etc., on the cameras, firmware, I have to do it manually. They cannot phone home to get the updates. So essentially, every single IoT device on my network, I'm trying to put on a separate VLAN so they can't talk to home, except the ones I trust, like obviously Apple, devices, all those I kind of trust to be able to talk, because you need to do that regularly after updates. But any sort of IoT device, like say a switch, a smart switch, or a video camera, etc., they have to be on a separate VLAN so they can talk. They can't talk home. Also, Tyler, I wanted to also mention you ran a story. You talked about the internet in Ukraine, about how is it resilient? I hope so, because that's what the internet was built for. If you remember, back in the U.S. invented the internet, DARPA invented the internet, and they invented it to exactly withstand this kind of thing, right? If you get attacked in one area, hopefully the network is resilient enough to be able to communicate. That was the original, actually, invention of the internet, was to allow different generals or military bases to talk to each other in the event of an attack. So I'm really hoping that the internet doesn't go down in Ukraine. It shouldn't go down if it's well built, because that's actually what the internet actually was originally built for.
Just to build on that, Mabana, and for people listening, something quite important to remember is that the internet is a lot more resilient than the domain name servers are. So what I would implore you to do if you are worried about losing access is, I would say 90% of the time you think you've lost access to the internet, it's actually a DNS issue, which means you just can't go from the words you're used to remembering, like CNN.com, to the website you're trying to get to, like 69.128.37.11. I made that IP address up, but the principle is that for some of your most cherished sources of news or websites, it may be worth you writing down just a handful of IP addresses. And you can just pop that in a browser, just like you pop in a nice friendly CNN.com. And you may find that when you can't get access due to unable to do that lookup, that you can get access directly at the IP. Knowing those sorts of things can be very handy tricks when you think you're high and dry. You may not be.
Okay. Are we ready for a few more tweets here? I've got this one from our friend Amay from Reuters. It says, Swedish armed forces say that Russian fighter jets violated Swedish airspace. 4 Russian fighter jets briefly violated Swedish airspace over the Baltic Sea on Wednesday, the Swedish armed forces said in a statement. And that's no news to Swedes. Russia's been doing crazy shit like this for quite a while now.
But they were flying quite close to Gotland, of course. Mm-hmm. And we actually have Patriots on Gotland, so they actually keep the distance.
So the Professor Asif shares this one from the Economic Times in India, how the U.S. made a weapon of the U.S. dollar. America is weaponizing its currency to pressure its global economic and geopolitical position. Interesting thought. It says, is dollar weaponized to preserve U.S. global economic and geopolitical position? And the answer to that, my friends, is yes. The economist Satyajit Das analysis, even before the Ukraine and Russia crisis is presented. In one sense, a lot of this is about the dollar, and Russia is trying to get, more than anyone other than China, is trying to get the world off the dollar, and they're going to join forces to try and do exactly that. And some players in the Middle East, notably Iran, are also into that game, and that's potentially, I mean, that's the reason I've been giving why I believe the U.S. provoked Putin to go into Ukraine by simply suggesting that it might join NATO, because we wanted him to self-sabotage so that we could sanction him into the ground.
You know, Tyler, that's a brave thing to say because it's so unwoke just to make an observation. I applaud you for saying that.
And Tyler, before the war started, I mean, the Russia invaded Ukraine, they exchanged a lot of renminbi, the Chinese yuan, with their ruble. So you can see how they're angry of the CCP government, but they won't show it on the service because right now the ruble is like a 0.0000 many zeros to 1 yuan. So yeah, they trick China.
I just saw a Sky News video of the Ukraine analysis of what's going on the ground, and it was a map of Ukraine and where the Russian forces are making progress. And for the first time, I heard, the on-screen commentators with the large maps behind them suggest that it now appears that Russia is now trying to encircle Kiev. As I said now 3 days ago, that was the plan all along. And now it seems that the mainstream media outlets are figuring this out, that in fact this 40-kilometer long convoy, it makes a little more sense when you understand they're planning to encircle the whole thing. And indeed, yeah. So anyway, the next tweet is from Thomas Tong from NPR. The headline says, climate change threatens nearly 1/3 of U.S. hazardous chemical facilities. The facilities are located in every state and are threatened by floods, hurricanes, and wildfires that could cause dangerous leaks and explosions. Yeah. We need to, by the way, it's not just these hazardous chemical facilities that are threatened by climate change. It's a whole lot of everything, bridges and highways, and my goodness, the world was built for a pre-climate change environment. And extreme weather, it changes the dynamic for everything built more than 10 years ago, before that concept came into play. So it's going to get very interesting very quickly on that regard. Thank you for that one, Thomas. And then, Carl, you had this one about the Apple AR VR hardware that you could or should share. This interesting link. Oh, Carl left? He did. Sorry. So Carl DM'd me about Apple completing production tests for its long-rumored AR and VR headsets. And that
Tyler, a quick point on it. I also tweeted one article. So basically, it gives us a background on how the competitive chip market plays out. So there's a company called AMD and there's a company called Apple. Both manufacture chips, advanced chips. So we know for Apple, there's a chip called M1, and for AMD, there's a chip. The flagship chip is AMD Ryzen. So if you go to that article, it explains how basically the Apple M1 chip is designed. It's basically designed for more neural network computation. The RAM sits really close to processor in that network. But if you look at the design for AMD Ryzen, it basically is beautifully designed for more floating point number calculation, meaning they would help gamers by far. So Microsoft can take an AMD chip and put it into their system, and gamers, and if they reduce their cost slightly, the gamers would never leave Microsoft ecosystem because the AMD chips, Ryzen especially, they just beat Apple M1 chip on so many gaming parameter by far. So that's even if Apple come up with their metaverse, I think fundamentally it needs to operate. It needs fuel and that platform which can support that real-time rendering. So people in the industry who are the geeks, they say that in long term, the winner is Microsoft with AMD processor in this metaverse game.
I would disagree with that. I think NVIDIA is probably the number one graphics processor on the market right now. Most of the software that's developed is within a closed ecosystem called CUDA. and that makes development very easy. AMD has historically been awful at supporting any sort of capabilities such as fluid simulations and other things. Of course, they're open source, but the support there is always lagging. It's like everything else that's open source. It's buggy, it's cumbersome, it's not easy to use, and consumers are lazy. So reducing any friction like that is critically important, and NVIDIA is kind of leading the way in that. So I disagree with those two main arguments there.
Yeah, I think that was history. But if you look at the whole design, just from the chip design point of view, I think M1 is anyone. If you compare the test, M1 is a much inferior chip. Yeah, what happened with the customer support and everything that Microsoft needs to figure out.
I do have a question on that, which is if these devices are going to be mobile, then a metric that's more important than the raw power is the power per watt, the floating point operations per watt, or whatever metric you want to pick. And I believe that Apple and their M1 and soon presumably upcoming M2 architecture is incredibly good performance per watt. So I don't know how that factors into the argument.
Yeah, it is good for neural network computation, but it's not designed for floating point calculation. So basically, for gaming, metaverse is basically another thing, but it's going to be for gamers, right? How the gaming ecosystem looks like. So that aspect, especially in that focused area, Apple doesn't have that much advantage over AMD, right?
Okay. Next tweet here. We've got one from Poppy that American General David Petraeus, one of America's leading military figures, believes that Russian President Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine is not a war that Putin can win due to inadequate troop numbers and fierce resistance from the Ukrainians. So he's putting his name on that one. And Russia wants a list of weapons that will never be deployed in Ukraine, according to Sergei Lavrov, who's their foreign minister there in Russia. And he's saying that he would like a list of weapons that Ukraine will never see. Foreign minister of Russia is demanding Ukraine demilitarize and will write a specific list of which weapons the nation will never use.
Hey, Tyler.
Yes.
Tyler, two things here. Number one, Russia is just totally screwing up the PR game. It'd probably be wiser for them to shut up than to continue down this line. But anyway, the more they talk, the more they build up waves of people against them. And then the other thing, back to what Petraeus said, who I think very highly of. One thing, the Russians must not have been really planning this, because a couple of years ago, for their conscripts, usually it used to be a 2-year commitment. They lowered it to a year. And if you were really preparing for something like this, there's no way in hell you would have changed your conscripts. You would have cut their time in half, especially when they account for about 20% of your force. So I can see why the generals look kind of perplexed. I wonder if that many people really knew that the buildup actually was going to actually be an actual invasion. They're just not prepared. Anyway, thank you. Bye.
Okay.
Pay attention to what Lavrov just said. That may be the way out. Because what he's saying, if you parse that, is that if Ukraine agrees not to deploy certain weapons, okay, that may be the deal out. They're no longer asking them not to be part of NATO. They're just saying you just can't have certain weapons on your, within your boundaries. But maybe they're willing to live with Ukraine eventually becoming, part of NATO. There'll probably be a delay. I mean, I think that may be the way out of this. That they may be looking for a way out, and the way out may be for Ukraine to say we won't deploy certain weapons. I mean, it's an easy thing for Ukraine to agree to, because they've already given up their nukes. I mean, it may be the off ramp for Putin. That may be very important what he just said.
Period. Okay, so the other thing, real quick, is I don't know if you guys know, and you can check transcripts. And about over 10 years ago, Putin actually, probably more in a joking fashion, basically said to NATO, "Hey, if the Cold War is truly over, can we be a part of NATO?" So just to give you guys a little fun fact there.
This does make me wonder about I've always been wondering
If I
about the
may,
timing of this.
sorry.
So about the timing of this conflict, and I don't know if anybody has any answers to the timing and as to like the why now question, but it does make me wonder if this could be the result of just an analysis that somebody's been doing. One of his military branches had done an analysis, and part of this scenario planning has been, what happens if NATO put X weapons in Ukraine, and then maybe it's a response to a report rather than anything else. I don't know if there's any credence to that being a possible speculation, of course, but just another factor.
This reminds me of a skit by Jon Stewart that maybe the whole Cold War is just a misunderstanding because Russians have this way of speaking like, hey, have a nice day. No, in Russia, it would be, I wish that your remaining hours are pleasant, comrade. And so this, I would agree with, I believe it was Ken who was saying that perhaps this is actually a very reasonable request on the part of the Russians. It's just delivered in this kind of very, in a way that has a lot of Russian sauce on it. So you have to parse it out very carefully.
Okay. So, a few more tweets then. Katerina found a really interesting one in Wired that here's the headline from Wired, that Google's new tech can read your body language without cameras. The company's ATAP research team is using radar to help computers respond to your movements, like turning off a TV if it senses you've fallen asleep. The next is from David Crace that Facebook says today's cellular networks aren't ready for the metaverse. Or put another way, they said that their metaverse ambitions won't be possible without better cellular networks. So meaning they're waiting for 5G plus or maybe 6G potentially to roll out their visions for the metaverse.
I think the subtle message there, Tyler, sorry I didn't mean to speak over. I think the subtle message there is the telco, there's a subtle message in terms of how the metaverse is going to be delivered. And obviously the use cases are very early, although they're accelerating at a very strong clip. I think there's a subtle message in there that says that the enterprise use cases are not going to be developed by the carriers on the licensed spectrum because they don't have the delivery. So I think there's a subtle message there saying, yeah, the carriers own the licensed spectrum. Unlicensed is not secure enough for industrial traffic, real-time information, B2B, B2C. But I think the subtle message is that the enterprise has to drive the go-to-market for the metaverse use cases. Because if we wait for the carriers who have the spectrum, they won't do it and their balance sheets won't support it. Last comment.
Gotcha.
Well, that's the subtle, but then there's also that's a huge statement as well. I mean, you're right on in terms of you got to go into the use case of the opportunity, but this whole thing about Meta's been emerging for 20 plus years, so there is for Meta to be saying that, you're right, but that's also kind of like no one's going to be walking across the street with their VR glasses anytime soon.
Yeah, there's definitely discretion on that, but I think history is repeating itself, right? So when we went from wired to wireless, and the cellular networks were not going to support certain, then not critical use cases, we went to the 3G offload, right? So all of a sudden your hotspots were Starbucks and McDonald's, and then that became the whole, licensed and unlicensed spectrum, history lesson, which I know Tyler's really good at pointing out. So I think this is just history repeating itself with a completely new and more immersive use case. But the point you make is spot on. We still have to figure out what the metaverse is and what it isn't. And because it's the huge, art of the possible whiteboard, is that the only thing you can do if you're conservative is you need to start putting stakes down of what it's not, right? Just to control the boundaries. And I think that's why you've seen some companies say, okay, virtual strip clubs, we're not going to do that. And anything else that, threatens the goodwill of its people in business or consumer, we're not going to do that. And then they'll fill it in with the viability of use cases. But the point well taken.
Well, that's a great point. That's an excellent use case. Just location-based entertainment, just that whole concept where, just as you're saying, there's going to be opportunities in the short term for on-premise or however you want to describe it, more location-based due to the bandwidth things.
Exactly.
Alrighty. Next up is a tweet from Poppy that according to Ukrainian Minister of Defense, the captured Russian soldiers will now be released to their mothers if they come for their sons to Kiev, Ukraine. As Russia continues to hush up the scale of its losses it suffers since its full-scale invasion, they're now coming up with creative ways to deal with all of these POWs. So
I would not want to be a POW going back home at this time because that would be treason. So they probably need to think that through.
With your mother.
Yeah. The next is from Thomas Tong, that a drug factory has come up with some interesting new little, what are called beads, which have been implanted in mice, which have killed tumors within a week. Among the many challenges in treating tumors is the difficulty in getting anti-cancer drugs to the right locations and in the right amounts. And these new drug factory beads are taking out tumors in a week when embedded or implanted in mice. That's positive news.
Hey, Tyler, did you just say that Ukraine's saying that the Russian mothers would have to come to Ukraine to pick the kids up? Is that correct?
That's right.
So think about how smart that is of them, because they know that if the Russian mothers have to come to Ukraine to pick the kids up, maybe the Russians will stop shelling them for a while because they might kill. That wouldn't be really good optics to kill the mothers picking up their kids, the Russian mothers picking up their kids. So it's a way of stopping the shelling in Ukraine if the Russian mothers are visiting Ukraine. Correct?
I guess.
Oh, it's a great strategic move. It's a great PR move, propaganda move too. So.
Okay, and the next one. Speaking of great PR moves, the Saudi Crown Prince (MBS) Mohammed bin Salman is back in the news, and that's the Saudi Crown Prince who's largely believed to be behind the Khashoggi killings of the American journalist Khashoggi, and that's now a trending topic on Twitter today because somebody asked MBS, as he's known, how he feels about President Biden recently calling him out for his role in that whole drama. And his response was, "I don't care." Saudi Crown Prince shrugs off concerns from Biden over the Khashoggi assassination, saying, "I don't care."
Tyler, another thing, just not fun fact, but a fact. Since the list of all the soldiers deployed by Russia into Ukraine actually leaked, the median age is 44 for the soldiers. So there will be Russian babuskas going to fetch their kids, Uganda.
They could bring some good pierogies, though. So I saw a really amazing video of a Ukrainian military leader interviewing the captured Russian soldiers. They were all had beanies pulled over their faces, and they were handcuffed, but they were standing shoulder to shoulder very comfortably, and like 20 people side by side. And he's interviewing them, and he says, "What's your name?" They say their name. Then he says, "Where do you work?" And nearly every one of the 20 worked at schools. And each one of them said the exact same story, that they were told they were participating, they needed to go attend some military training somewhere, and for 2 to 3 days, no questions asked. And then they showed up and went to this military training, and then they were told they were going to participate in a military drill. And halfway through the drill, they were given live ammunition, and then next thing you know, they're in Ukraine, and they've never been part of the Russian military before or anything like that. And
Tyler, a stark similarity. Last year, when Chinese came to Indian border, when they invaded the border area, they were also doing the exercise in that region. So they did not build, which was ignored because it was so what happened is that biannually in 2 years, even India goes and do that military exercise and come back. After 2 years, China also comes to that region, do military exercise, and goes back to the. Last year, when they came, they did the exercise, and after that, they slowly built up and just came to the border. Even the many of the PLA young fighter, they also didn't know that this was the plan. So this is maybe we can say that this is how these covert operation works. Even your military people do not know what was going to happen.
I saw actually an article about an 18-year-old soldier who had surrendered or captured, and he had literally just joined 2 weeks ago, he said, and he had no idea what was going on, and they had no idea that they were being sent in there. They thought it was also just for training 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, there was also
If it was me, I would hold that story too. I mean, it makes sense to hold that story if you're captured. I wanted to go back to the Mohammed bin Salman point
Sure.
just because it went without comment.
Sure.
I think that it's extremely strange. I don't know when Biden made that comment, if it was before the crisis kicked off, but I certainly think that the response, if the response was in latter days, I am sure that MBS couldn't give two shits what Biden said, because he knows that Biden needs Saudi oil, and that America has fed upon the teat of the Saudis for oil stability, and essentially, if we are to succeed, we will need OPEC more than OPEC needs us. Well, certainly politically, and I think that one of the pressures that needs to be brought to bear is that OPEC should support the allies, in inverted commas, in bringing down the input cost of fuel, because that is, I think someone was talking about timing. The critical timing on this is that it can do maximal damage to the American dollar and the Western zero interest rate policy environment. So I think timing is for maximum economic pain that is incurred by the supply chain. And one should never forget that Saudi Arabia is critical to global supply chain in the region.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The last tweet of the day is from Wired, and a lot of people shared this one. So thank you to everyone who did. That the ice cream machine hackers are suing McDonald's for nearly $1 billion over the broken ice cream machines that McDonald's been toying with our emotions about for many decades. Every American knows the experience of trying to go in and getting a McFlurry to be told that the ice cream machines are broken or defrosting or whatever the hell the problem is. And it's very frustrating. And now the hackers who've been fixing these machines, and they're being told that it's illegal to use their techniques to fix these machines, they're now suing for $900 million. They claim that the golden arches crushed their business and left soft serve customers out in the cold. No pun intended. And it's a company called Kitch, spelled Kytch, that worked to invent and sell a device designed to fix McDonald's notoriously broken ice cream machines, only to watch the fast food giant crush their business like the hopes of so many would-be McFlurry customers. Now Kitch is instead seeking to serve out cold revenge, nearly $1 billion worth. Late Tuesday night, Kitch filed a long-expected legal complaint against McDonald's, accusing the company of false advertising and tortious interference. I've never seen that word before.
Tortious interference.
Let's see what that word means. Look up tortious.
A tort is a case. Isn't it tort? Yeah, tortious is relating to a tort, law case, legal case.
Okay.
Tort law is.
Tort law. It's a very British word here. Here we go.
I know what tortious interference means in terms of company deals. When basically if company A and B are going into a deal, and if party C try to influence party A to not make that deal, then it's called tortious interference.
Okay, got it. That's a legal term. Yeah. So the next one is Kitch's basically suing for $900 million because they could have made that had McDonald's used their products. Okay, there you go.
Seems spurious.
Yeah.
No, isn't that the right to repair stuff? Isn't that where it started? It's that McDonald's ice cream maker, right to repair, that you have to use McDonald's third party service provider to do it, which is slightly absurd. And that was like the beginning of this right to repair stuff.
Yeah. Taylor ice cream machines at it again. Okay, so we've gone through all the tweets. Thank you everybody for all your beautiful tweets, and my apologies to everyone whose tweets I didn't get to. we will get to it tomorrow, and we'll cover all the other big news as we always do. So thank you to everybody. We'll see you again manana.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Tyler,
everyone.
I did have,
Take care,
do
everybody.
you mind if I add something here quickly
Go ahead.
before you shut it down? I just wanted to point out, before we were talking about if Ukraine joins NATO and the fact of not putting nuclear weapons on their borders, but that's not what happened when Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania joined back in 2004. So I'm not sure that